The fog in New Orleans doesn't just roll in. It seeps, like a ghostly tide, into the very bones of the city. It clings to the ornate, weeping black iron of the French Quarter, muffling the distant, soulful cry of a jazz trumpet, and blurring the gas lamps into hazy, golden tears. It was a city that lived comfortably with its ghosts, a place where the veil between the living and the other was permanently thin, tattered like old lace, and hidden behind an unassuming, ivy-choked courtyard on a forgotten street, marked only by a gate of twisting onyx bars that seemed to drink the moonlight, was the dark, beating heart of that other world, the onyx sanctum. To the human eye, it was just another crumbling Creole mansion, its grandeur long faded. To the supernatural elite, it was the only neutral ground in North America. A hotel and club of impossible decadent luxury where werewolves, witches, fae, and vampires could coexist under a single unbreakable rule of truce. And the master of that truce, the ancient silent owner of the sanctum, was Lord Alaric Volkov. Alaric sat in his private study, a vast circular room at the apex of the sanctum, walled in by enchanted obsidian glass that showed him the entire city laid out like a glittering, chaotic map. He was perfectly, unnaturally still, a sculpture of timeless aristocratic beauty and coiled, lethal power. At over 1,000 years old, Alaric had grown weary of most things: politics, passion, conquest, even the hunt. All that remained was duty, a cold, possessive pride in the empire he had built, and the crushing, profound ennui of eternity. He had watched empires rise and fall, seen stars shift in their courses, and the fleeting, frantic lives of mortals were like the buzzing of summer insects, briefly irritating, easily extinguished. But his empire had just been violated. "It is gone, my lord." The voice came from Darius, Alaric's chamberlain and enforcer, a vampire almost as old and twice as brutal as his impeccable tailored suit suggested. Darius did not fidget. He did not apologize. He simply stood in the center of the room, a pillar of shadow and menace, and stated the fact. "The bloodstone orb, stolen from the vault." Alaric's eyes, the color of a frozen Arctic sea, did not blink, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The vault was not some simple human safe. It was a pocket dimension, a fold in reality sealed by Alaric's own blood, and a magic so ancient that few on Earth could even recognize it. "The wards?" Alaric's voice was quiet, a silken rumble that held the promise of structural collapse. "Bypassed," Darius confirmed, his own voice devoid of emotion. "Not broken, my lord. Bypassed. As if the thief possessed a key. As if they belonged." The implication hung in the air, thick and toxic. "An inside job." "I have served you for 7 centuries, Alaric," Darius said, the rare use of the first name a measure of the situation's desperate gravity. "I have never seen a breach like this. The Fae delegation? They are arrogant enough. The Coven of the Bayou? They have the knowledge. The Lycan Alpha? He has the audacity. They posture and preen." Alaric dismissed them with a lazy flick of his wrist, though his stillness had become predatory. "They lack the subtlety. This was not a frontal assault. This was betrayal. This was one of ours. Or one of mine." His gaze drifted from the city lights, which he no longer truly saw, to the polished obsidian desk before him, his staff, the hundreds of employees, supernatural and human, who ran his establishment. He prided himself on his absolute control, on the loyalty he commanded through fear, and the golden cage of his rewards. Yet one of them had betrayed him. The bloodstone orb was not just a priceless artifact. It was the anchor, the very thing that channeled and stabilized the ancient magic of the truce, the magic that kept the sanctum hidden and, more importantly, kept its volatile patrons from tearing each other to shreds. Without it, the truce wards would flicker and die within weeks. Chaos would reign, and his sanctuary would become a slaughterhouse. Paranoia is a tool, Darius, not an indulgence, Alaric mused, rising from his chair. He moved with a liquid, silent grace that was utterly inhuman, his feet making no sound on the marble floor. I have built this world to be impenetrable, and the rot, it seems, has grown from within. I will find it. I will find it, and I will tear it out by the root, no matter how deep it has burrowed. Shall I begin? Interrogations? Darius's lips curled, revealing the faintest sharp white hint of a fang. His methods were infamous, involving blood, fear, and the breaking of minds. No! Alaric stopped at the window, his reflection a pale, perfect mask against the night. Your methods are loud. They will scatter the rats before I have found the nest. No, if the thief is among my staff, they believe they are clever. They believe they are unseen. A cold, dangerous light entered his eyes. I shall simply join them in the shadows. Darius raised a single skeptical eyebrow. My lord, prepare the sovereign penthouse. I will be checking in. You? The surprise in Darius's voice was genuine, a rare crack in his stoic facade. You would mix with as A.V. Vandermeer, an eccentric, obscenely wealthy human recluse, the kind our patrons despise and our staff secretly mocks. Alaric's lips quirked in a smile that held no humor, only ice. Humans are invisible in this world, Darius. They are furniture, prey, background noise. No one will look twice at a mortal fool demanding fresh towels, and I want to see, with my own eyes, how the servants behave when the master is not looking. I want to smell the ambition and the desperation on them. I want to see the greed in their eyes when they think no one is watching. It is beneath you, Darius stated flatly. Finding my property is beneath no one, Alaric corrected, his voice hardening to diamond. Get me the files. I want all new hires, human and otherwise, the ones with no history, the ones with needs. They are always the first to break. Miles away, in a cramped, sterile, fluorescent-lit locker room deep in the sanctum's human-only staff quarters, Serafina Hayes pulled her dark wavy hair into a tight, severe bun. Her uniform, a crisp black dress with a starched white apron, felt like a costume for a play she hadn't auditioned for. She was exhausted. It wasn't the simple tiredness of a double shift. It was a profound, systemic exhaustion, a weariness that had settled deep into her bones and felt permanent. She clutched her phone, her knuckles white. The screen was illuminated, showing her world. A photo of her son, Finian. 8 years old, with her late husband's eyes and a gap-toothed grin that used to light up her entire life. The smile in the photo was a relic, a memory from 6 months ago, before the illness had truly taken hold. A new text message glowed beneath it. From Dr. Eris. Mrs. Hayes, Finian's cell counts are anomalous again. The decline is faster than we anticipated. His body isn't responding to the transfusions as it should. We need to discuss new treatment options, possibly experimental. Please call me as soon as you can. Anomalous. Options. Experimental. They were all code words. Code for we don't know. Code for we're terrified. And worst of all, code for it costs more money. Serafina felt the familiar cold fist of panic squeeze her chest so tightly she couldn't breathe. Finn wasn't just sick. He was a medical mystery. A rare, aggressive blood disorder that baffled every specialist. It was as if his very life force, his vitality, was being siphoned away, leaving him pale, perpetually cold, and too weak to even play video games. The medical bills were a mountain she could no longer see the top of, and her old job at a diner hadn't even covered the interest. "For Finn," she whispered, her voice rough. She shoved the phone into her locker, locking the terror away with it. She splashed cold water on her face. But it couldn't wash away the image of Finn in his hospital bed, looking smaller and paler every day. This job was her last, desperate hope. The Onyx Sanctum paid its human staff an absurd, life-changing amount of money. The catch? You saw nothing, you heard nothing, and you never spoke of the clientele. The rumors in the locker room were wild. Rock stars, reclusive billionaires, bizarre European royalty with strange allergies and stranger demands. Serafina didn't care. They could be lizard people from Mars as long as their paychecks cleared. She joined the other night shift housekeepers for the briefing. The manager, a stern, imposing woman named Ms. Morveau, who Serafina was certain was not entirely human, her eyes were too black, her movements too precise, addressed the group. "Attention!" Morveau's voice cut through the quiet, no-nonsense and sharp. "Standard assignments. The Fae delegation in the garden wing has complained about the scent of iron again, so bleach is forbidden. The Lycan Alpha is in residence. Do not, under any circumstances, run his silver." Her gaze scanned the room and locked onto Serafina. "Except for you, Hayes." Serafina's stomach dipped, turning to ice. "Oh God, am I being fired?" "Ma'am? You're on the penthouse rotation tonight. The Sovereign suite is occupied. A last-minute booking." Morveau's black eyes scanned Serafina, making her feel small and clumsy. "The guest is A.V. Vandermeer. He is human, but he is particular. He is paying a premium for absolute privacy and has demanded a non-intrusive human attendant. You will not make eye contact. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will touch only what is necessary for your duties. This hotel values discretion above all else, Ms. Hayes. A single complaint, a single item amiss, and you will not just be fired. You will be forgotten. Is that clear?" The threat, veiled as it was terrifyingly clear. "Yes, ma'am, perfectly." Pushing her heavy, ornate brass cart, Serafina began the long walk. She took the claustrophobic staff elevator up to the penthouse floor, the eerie, weighted silence of the ride amplifying the frantic beat of her heart. Anomalous. Faster than we anticipated. She had to keep this job. She had to. She emerged into the main lobby of the penthouse wing, a space of breathtaking, decadent gloom. The air was heavy, scented with old money, expensive perfume, and something else, something coppery and wild. The patrons of the sanctum moved with a predatory grace that made the air feel thin. She passed a table where beings of impossible cold beauty, the Fae, sipped glowing blue liquid and laughed like the sound of breaking glass. She kept her eyes glued to the plush, blood-red carpet, but not before catching the gaze of a man in a flawless Armani suit, whose eyes were solid, burning gold. A Lycan, she guessed, who watched her pass with an unnerving, hungry focus. She hurried on, feeling like a mouse in a den of sleeping lions, her humanity a fragile, breakable thing. Finally, she reached the double black carved doors of the Sovereign penthouse. It was the last door at the end of the hall, isolated, silent. She took a deep, shuddering breath, smoothed her apron with clammy hands, and raised a trembling hand to knock. Inside, the penthouse was utterly silent. Alaric, dressed in the simple, expensive dark cashmere of a human billionaire, had already set his stage. On the massive, unmade king-sized bed, amidst the rumpled, thousand-thread-count sheets, he had tossed a thick, untidy stack of $100 bills. At least $10,000. Enough to solve a small human's problems for a month, a year. A test of simple, brutish greed. On the black marble fireplace, He placed the second, more subtle test. A small golden chalice, intricate with ancient sigils. It was a minor artifact, but priceless to any collector of the occult, and imbued with a faint, tingling magic that any sensitive mortal would feel as a buzz against their skin, a whisper in their mind. A test of curiosity, of hidden ambition, of a desire for things beyond their station. He had dismissed Darius. He wanted no one else here. He wanted pure, unfiltered observation. As he heard the soft footsteps approach the door, Alaric Volkov did not hide in a closet. He did not step onto the balcony. He simply took a step back, into the deep shadows cast by a towering, unlit bookshelf, and he let his ancient power wrap around him, pulling the darkness over his form like a shroud. He did not become invisible, not truly. He simply ceased to be seen, bending the light and the mind's perception around his form. His breathing, already an option rather than a necessity, slowed to a stop. His heartbeat, already a faint and distant drum, went silent. He became the cold air in the corner of the room, a predator in perfect, patient stillness. He heard the soft, hesitant knock. Housekeeping. He watched, his senses flaring, expanding to fill the entire suite. He could hear the frantic rabbit thump of her heart, a rhythm of pure, unadulterated fear. 120 beats per minute. Tachycardic. He could smell the faint, clean scent of lye soap from her uniform, and beneath it, the sharper, metallic, acidic tang of her anxiety. The door opened with a soft snick of the high-end lock. He watched the woman enter. Serafina Hayes. 29 years old. Widowed. Husband, Daniel. Car accident 2 years prior. One son, Finian, 8. Currently in the pediatric critical care unit at New Orleans General with an undiagnosed blood disorder. Desperately in debt? Facing eviction? Perfect. She was a bundle of raw, desperate needs. The perfect tool for a thief. The perfect person to break. She stood frozen for a moment, her eyes wide as she took in the opulent room, the sheer scale of it, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the impossible god's-eye view of the city she only knew from its cracked sidewalks. She looked terrified, overwhelmed, and so very, very human. She pushed her cart inside, the wheel catching for a moment on the thick rug. The door clicked shut behind her, plunging them into a shared, heavy silence. The test had begun. Serafina's first instinct was to flee, to turn, run, and never look back. The opulence of the room was an assault. It was larger than her entire apartment, and the silence was heavy, watchful. But the image of Finn's pale face, the glowing red of the overdue bills on her kitchen table, anchored her. She couldn't run. She had to be perfect. "Just a room," she whispered, her voice soundless. "Just a rich, messy human." She forced her limbs to move. Professionalism, drilled into her at a dozen other lesser jobs, took over. It was a shield. Cart parked, she began her circuit. She started with dusting, as she always did. She moved toward the massive black marble fireplace, her microfiber cloth in hand. And she saw it. It wasn't large, but it glowed. A small golden chalice, resting on the mantel. It was clearly ancient, impossibly intricate, carved with sigils and patterns that seemed to move if she looked at them too long. It was the most beautiful and strangest thing she had ever seen. From the corner, Alaric watched. His gaze was absolute. He saw the subtle shift in her posture, the way her hand paused mid-air. The chalice was a minor artifact, true, but it was imbued with a faint thrum of dormant magic. A sensitive mortal, one with a spark of potential or desperation, would feel it. It would call to them. This was the test of ambition, of a desire for things beyond one station. He expected her to touch it. He wanted her to. It would be the first crack in her facade. Serafina did feel it. A strange, inexplicable warmth, like a low-voltage current, vibrated against her skin. A faint, wordless whisper seemed to echo in her mind, a promise of something. Power? Knowledge? She leaned closer, her fingers itching. Then Ms. Morvaux's voice, cold and sharp, cut through her memory. "You will touch only what is necessary." Serafina recoiled as if burned. This wasn't an opportunity. This was a trap. This was how people like her, people with nothing, were caught and discarded. With a sudden, fierce resolve, she meticulously dusted the marble around the chalice, her cloth coming within a millimeter of the golden base, but never, ever making contact. She treated it as if it were a landmine. In the shadows, Alaric's frozen heart gave an interested, imperceptible twitch. Interesting. Most would have touched it. Most would have been unable to resist. He had watched a fey emissary, a being of supposed high standing, attempt to pocket that very chalice just a month prior. This human, she had restraint. But that was only the test of curiosity. The test of need was yet to come. She moved to the centerpiece of the room, the massive, unmade bed. The sheets were thousand-thread-count Egyptian cotton, rumpled and tossed aside as if by a restless sleeper. And there, stark against the dark gray sheets, was the second bait. A thick, untidy stack of $100 bills. It wasn't hidden. It was discarded, an afterthought. Alaric's senses focused with pinpoint, predatory accuracy. He heard her breath catch in her throat. He heard her heart, which had steadied to a nervous 95 beats per minute, suddenly skip, then begin to hammer. 130 BPM. 135. He could smell the acidic spike of adrenaline and longing pour from her. This was the test. He knew, to the dollar, what she owed the hospital. This money on the bed wouldn't solve all her problems, but it would buy her time. It would buy her Finn's experimental treatment. It was right there. Serafina froze. Her vision tunneled. The room, the view, the fireplace, it all vanished. There was only the money. She didn't even have to count it. It was $10,000, maybe $15,000. A fortune. A miracle. Enough to pay for the experimental options Dr. Aris had mentioned. Enough to give Finn a chance. The temptation was a physical thing, suffocating her. Her hand, the one holding the dust cloth, twitched. She imagined, just for a second, sweeping it into the deep pocket of her apron. Who would know? A rich, eccentric fool like Vandermeer probably wouldn't even notice. He might have even forgotten it. Or maybe this was the real test. A test of nerve. He left it for me. The thought was insidious. He left it to see if I was bold enough. In the darkness, Alaric smiled. A cold, thin, triumphant smile. There it is, the break, the rationalization. Now, she takes it, and I have my answer. Serafina's hand began to lift. She closed her eyes, just for 1 second. And in that darkness, she saw Finn's face. Not smiling, but as he was this morning. Pale, his breathing shallow, his small hand limp in hers. "I'll do anything for you, baby." Then she saw herself, dragged out of the hotel by Ms. Morvaux. Fired. Blacklisted. Forgotten. She couldn't help Finn if she was on the street. She couldn't help Finn if she lost this job. This money wasn't a miracle. It was the devil. With a shuddering, ragged breath that was almost a sob, she turned her back on the money. She turned away entirely. She marched to the other side of the vast bed, giving the stack of cash a berth so wide it was almost comical, as if it were a venomous snake coiled on the sheets. She began stripping the bed, her movements sharp, jerky, almost violent in their self-control. She pulled the sheets, the heavy pillowcases, and the massive duvet, bundling them all up, never once letting her gaze or her hands stray to the other side. She remade the bed with fresh, crisp linens from her cart, her motions precise, automatic. Alaric's smile faded. The cold interest returned, sharper this time. He was not angry. He was perplexed. It was a sensation he rarely felt. He had bet on greed. He had bet on desperation. He had lost. This human, this insignificant, frightened mouse. She was not breaking. Serafina, shaking, moved to the bathroom. It was a cavern of black marble and glass. She scrubbed the surfaces, her movements frantic, scouring the sink, the glass shower, the deep tub, trying to outrun the ghost of the temptation she had just faced. She felt weak, nauseated, and disgusted with herself for even considering it. She finished the bathroom, returned to the main room, and gathered her cart. She had not stolen. She had not touched. She was safe. She was at the door, her hand on the handle ready to flee, when her pocket vibrated. She flinched, a small, terrified squeak escaping her throat. She clapped her hand over her mouth, positive she had made a sound, that the reclusive Mr. Vandermeer would storm out of a bedroom and have her fired. Silence. She pulled out her phone. The screen read, Dr. Eris. Alaric, still shrouded, watched. He saw her face drain of all remaining color, leaving it a waxy, translucent white. This was not part of his test. This was life, messy and brutal, intervening. Serafina's panic was absolute. She couldn't take the call here. She wasn't supposed to exist. She quickly, silently, pushed her cart out into the opulent, empty hallway, the heavy penthouse door clicking softly shut behind her. She huddled over the phone, pressing it to her ear, trying to make herself small. "Dr. Eris?" she whispered. "I'm at work. I can't. Is he okay?" Alaric stood inside the room, staring at the closed door. He was annoyed. His experiment was interrupted. He could let her go. He could dismiss her from his mind, another failed data point. But he couldn't. He needed to know. What was it? What news could possibly bleach a human of all hope in 1 second? He wanted to hear the rest of the story. He did not open the door. He simply stepped through it. For Alaric, a solid 3-inch thick oak door was a minor inconvenience. His form dissolved, not into smoke or mist. That was for the theater of common vampires, but into a stream of pure, cold shadow, a ripple in the fabric of the air. He flowed through the keyhole, through the microscopic cracks in the wood, and reformed in the hallway's deep shadows, 10 feet away from her, as silent as the grave. She was sliding down the silk-wallpapered wall, her back to him, her free hand clapped over her mouth. Her voice was a choked, desperate whisper. "What? What do you mean, not holding?" Alaric focused, his supernatural hearing filtering out the distant hum of the hotel's ventilation, the faint strains of a string quartet from the lounge 3 floors below. He zoomed in, past the static, to the tiny electronic voice coming from the phone's earpiece, hearing it as clearly as if Dr. Eris were standing next to him. "Mrs. Hayes, Serafina, I'm so sorry. We're losing him. The transfusions, they aren't holding. His body it's just not producing new blood. It's being consumed. I've never seen anything like it. His vitals are crashing. If we don't try something radical in the next 24 hours, you need to prepare yourself." Serafina made a terrible, strangled sound. No, please." "Consumed? What does that mean? What radical treatment? How much?" "I'll pay. I just got this new job. Serafina, it's a full plasmapheresis and stem cell protocol. It's highly experimental. The cost? Serafina, the insurance won't touch it. It's over $100,000, and that's just to start. And the chances, honestly, at this stage, they're minimal." $100,000. Serafina's world simply ended. She wasn't aware of disconnecting the call. Her hand fell limp to her side, the phone clattering to the plush carpet. She had just walked away from $10,000, and the universe had punished her by telling her it wouldn't have mattered anyway. It was a drop in the ocean, a cruel, cosmic joke. She was still in the hallway, exposed, but she had forgotten where she was. She was trapped in her own personal soundproof hell. She didn't scream. She didn't wail. The grief was too profound for that. She just sat there, folded into herself, her face buried in her apron, her entire body shaking in a paroxysm of grief so profound, so absolute, that it was utterly silent. Alaric stood in the shadows, watching. He had seen kingdoms fall. He had watched the Black Plague turn cities into boneyards. He had watched his own mortal family wither and die centuries ago. He had felt nothing but annoyance, or at best, a fleeting, detached sadness. But this was different. He analyzed the scene with a cold, detached clarity. The purity of her despair, the rawness of her integrity, which he had just witnessed. She had a dying child, the one motivator that, in his experience, justified any sin, any theft, any betrayal. And she didn't. Even now, huddled in the hallway, she wasn't plotting to go back and take the money. She had simply given up. He felt it again, an unfamiliar, unwelcome, and entirely annoying sensation. A cold, sharp pressure in his long, dead chest. It wasn't pity. It wasn't compassion. It was dissonance, her absolute, unbreakable integrity in the face of absolute, soul-crushing despair. It didn't compute. She was a paradox, a human who made no sense, and that word, consumed. After what felt like an eternity, Serafina got to her feet. She was a ghost, an automaton. She wiped her tear-streaked face on her apron, picked up her phone, straightened her uniform, and began to push her cart down the hallway, her movements stiff and broken. Alaric stepped back into his room, the door no barrier at all. He looked at the money on the bed. It suddenly seemed trivial, a crude, clumsy human tool. He looked at the golden chalice. He was no longer interested in his stolen orb. Not at this moment. He pulled a sleek, modern phone from his pocket and pressed the single contact. Darius. My lord? Have you found the thief? The woman, Serafina Hayes. Alaric's voice was flat, cold. I want everything. Not just her financials. I want her late husband's accident report. I want her son's entire medical file. Every note, every chart, every blood test. I want it on my desk. Now. And the test, my lord? The test is evolving. Alaric clipped the call. He stood at the window, staring down at the lights of New Orleans, but seeing nothing. The word echoed in his ancient mind, consumed. It was a word he knew well, a word from his world, not hers. An hour later, Darius appeared with a tablet. Alaric read. He saw the blood counts, the rapid cell degradation, the notes from a dozen baffled hematologists. Unnatural degradation. Source unknown. Patient's life force seems to be draining. Alaric's icy blue eyes narrowed. This was not a disease. This was not leukemia. This was not human. He made a decision. He shed his Vandermeer persona, the expensive cashmere dissolving as his form blurred at the edges, dissolving into a stream of shadow and cold night air. He flowed out the open balcony door, unseen by any, a silent wraith against the moon. He crossed the city in the space of 3 breaths. He reformed in the darkened, sterile hallway of the pediatric ICU at New Orleans General. The air hummed with antiseptic and quiet suffering. He passed through the wall, a ghost of cold air, into Finian's room. The room was dark, save for the pulsing green and red lights of the monitors. The boy, Finn, was shockingly small in the hospital bed, pale as marble, with dark, bruised circles under his eyes. He was unconscious, his breathing terrifyingly shallow. Alaric approached the bed. He didn't need to touch the boy. He could see it. Clinging to the child's small, flickering life force, invisible to mortal eyes, was a dark, ethereal filigree. A thing. It was a complex, multi-layered sigil, a parasite woven from dark energy, burrowed deep into the boy's spiritual and physical self. It was a low-level, but horrifyingly sophisticated curse of consumption. It wasn't feeding on the boy's blood, it was devouring his life force, his very anima. And the blood was just the first physical thing to break down. It was crude, dirty magic, but devastatingly effective. And, he realized with a jolt of genuine surprise, it was familiar. The energy signature. He'd felt it before. Faintly, on the bloodstone orb. Alaric looked at the dying boy, an innocent in a war he knew nothing about, and his cold intrigue turned quite suddenly into a focused, chilling, and utterly ancient rage. This was not random. This was targeted. He had come looking for a simple thief. Instead, he had found a conspiracy, a victim, and a puzzle. A human woman who did not break, and her son, who was being murdered by magic. Alaric Volkov reformed in the penthouse shadows, the cold rage in his ancient heart, a tangible thing. He knew. The betrayal was not simple theft. It was a calculated, intricate trap. The thief, Darius, it had to be. The energy signature was a sickening confirmation, had not just stolen the orb. He had cursed an innocent child and framed an innocent woman, knowing Alaric's paranoia would lead him to the perfect suspect, a desperate mother with every reason to steal. Darius had assumed Alaric would see Serafina as he saw all humans, as disposable, greedy, and weak. It was an exquisite miscalculation. He crossed the room and picked up the stack of bills from the bed. He then picked up the golden chalice. When he spoke, his voice was a low command that resonated through the very walls of the sanctum. Morveau. Miles away. In the staff locker room, Serafina had just slumped onto the bench, her shift over. She was hollow, a walking corpse. The tears had dried, leaving her skin tight and her eyes burning. She was in a void, a place beyond grief, trying to calculate the impossible. How did she leave her job? How did she get to the hospital? How did she say goodbye to her son? The locker room door opened. Ms. Morveau stood there, her black eyes expressionless. Hayes, you are not finished. Serafina looked up, numb. Ma'am, my shift is over. My son. Lord Alaric Volkov requests your presence, in the Sovereign Penthouse, now. The name meant nothing to her, but the title, Lord, and the location were a death knell. Vandermeer. He must have found a flaw. He was going to fire her. The last cruel joke. Please, she whispered, her voice cracking. Not now. Please, I'll clean it again tomorrow. For free. My son is... Now, Hayes. Morveau's voice was not unkind, but it was absolute. Defeated, Serafina followed, an automaton dragged back through the opulent hallways. She was brought to the double black doors, which opened silently before Morveau even touched them. She was gently pushed inside. The doors closed behind her, the click of the lock sealing her in. The room was dimmer, casting long shadows. The man she had thought of as Vandermeer was not there. In his place, standing before the vast window, was a figure of such intense power and cold, aristocratic beauty that he seemed to drain the color from the room. He was in a perfectly tailored, dark suit that seemed woven from the night itself. It was Alaric Volkov, and the mask of the fussy human mortal was gone. Ms. Hayes. His voice was a silken rumble that vibrated in her bones. Mr. Vandermeer? She whispered, her hands clenched at her apron. I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I can explain. Please, I need this job. You have been the subject of a test, Alaric said, turning slowly. His eyes were not the mild blue of a human. They were the color of a frozen Arctic sea, ancient and terrifying. My name is not Vandermeer. That was a lie. My name is Lord Alaric Volkov. I am the owner of this establishment. Serafina's blood ran cold. A test? Sir, I didn't. I know. He held up his hand. In it were the golden chalice and the stack of money. I left these for you. $10,000 and an artifact worth 20 times that. You were in desperate, life-altering need. I heard your phone call. I knew your son was dying, and you touched nothing. Serafina stared, her mind unable to bridge the gap. I don't understand. Your son, Finian, he is not sick. A new wild fear gripped her. What are you talking about? The doctors said. The doctors are fools, Alaric stated, not with arrogance but with simple fact. They are looking for a disease. What is afflicting your son is a curse, a parasite of dark magic, designed to drain his life force. Consumed! Wasn't that the word they used? She stared at him as if he were insane. Magic? A curse? That's not real. Is it? Alaric took a step closer. The air around him shimmered. He held his hand out, palm up. He concentrated, and a small, cold, blue flame ignited in his palm, dancing on his skin. Serafina stumbled back, a scream dying in her throat. There is no time for this, Alaric said, extinguishing the flame. His voice softened, losing its icy edge. I was in his hospital room. I saw the curse on him. It is killing him, and the doctor's medicine is only accelerating the process. They will kill him before morning. No, she cried, the word torn from her. I can save him. She stopped. What? My organization funds a private clinic. It specializes in these anomalies. We can move him. Tonight. Now. But you must trust me. Trust him. A man who had just admitted to lying, who spoke of curses, and held fire in his hand. She looked into his ancient, terrifying eyes, and she saw no deception. She saw a cold, profound fury, but it was not directed at her. It was directed at the thing that was hurting her son. She was a drowning woman, and he had just thrown her a lifeline made of shadows. What? What do you want? She whispered, the last terrible question of the desperate. For now? Nothing. Only your permission. She looked at the floor, at this man, at the impossible choice, and she remembered Finn's shallow breathing. Do it, she said, her voice a rasp. Save him, please. Alaric nodded once. He made a single call. Darius, the protocol is active. Move the boy from New Orleans General to the Sanctum. Sub-level 3. Medical emergency clearance. I will be down in 2 minutes. He hung up and looked at Serafina. Come with me, and do not be afraid of what you see. He led her not to an elevator, but to a simple, unmarked door in the penthouse. It opened onto an ancient stone spiral staircase, lit by flickering gaslight that defied the hotel's modern construction. They descended into the earth, deep beneath the foundations of the French Quarter, to a place that felt impossibly old. The air was dry and still. They emerged into a circular chamber, its walls made of the same black light-drinking onyx. In the center was a simple, raised stone slab. Darius was already there, his face a grim mask. A medical team was gently transferring Finn, his small body hooked to a portable beeping monitor, onto the slab. Mommy? Finn's voice was a thread, his eyes fluttering open. I'm here, baby. Serafina rushed to his side, clutching his hand. I'm right here. Out, Alaric commanded the medical team. They bowed and vanished up the stairs, leaving only Alaric, Darius, Serafina, and her dying son. What is this place? Serafina whispered, her terror rising. "A place of healing," Alaric said, "and power. Now hold his hand, and no matter what you see, do not let go." He stood opposite her. "Darius, the blade!" Darius produced a wicked black obsidian knife. Alaric took it. "The curse is anchored to his life force," he explained to Seraphina, his voice low. "I cannot simply banish it. I must draw it out, and it must be given a new, more appealing host." "A new host?" Seraphina said, her eyes wide. "You?" "I am older than the magic that binds him," Alaric said. He raised the knife, not to Finn, but to his own forearm. He drew a deep, swift line. Seraphina gasped. The blood that welled up was not just red. It was a deep, impossible crimson, almost black, and it glowed with a faint, silvery light. It was the blood of a king, ancient and potent. He held his bleeding arm over Finn's chest, letting the drops fall. They did not stain the boy's hospital gown. They hovered above his skin, merging into a single shimmering liquid pool of light. "Hold him," Alaric commanded. He began to speak, his voice dropping into an ancient guttural language of power and shadow. As he spoke, the air grew heavy. Finn's small body suddenly arched off the slab, a silent scream on his lips. The monitor beside him flatlined, a single piercing tone. "No!" Seraphina screamed. "You're killing him!" "Hold him!" Alaric roared, his eyes now glowing with the same silvery light as his blood. "It is fighting! It knows it is being evicted!" He pressed his bleeding palm onto the hovering pool of blood, forcing it down onto Finn's chest. The moment it made contact, a violent, visible reaction occurred. A black, spiderweb-like filigree of energy, the curse, was ripped from Finn's skin, drawn up into Alaric's hand. It fought, lashing out like a shadowy whip, striking Alaric's face and arm. Alaric did not flinch, his chant reaching a thunderous, commanding crescendo as the black energy was pulled, screaming silently, up his arm and into his body. Alaric's back arched, a guttural roar ripping from his chest. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The long, piercing note of the flatline monitor was replaced by a steady, strong beep, beep, beep. The black filigree was gone. Alaric stumbled back, his face pale, his arm still bleeding. Finian Hayes, his cheeks flushed with a healthy, vibrant pink for the first time in a year, took a deep, shuddering, easy breath. He did not wake. He simply fell into the first true, healing sleep of his life. Seraphina collapsed onto the slab, her arms draped over her son, sobbing in great, ragged, soul-cleansing gasps of relief. She turned to Alaric, who was binding his arm, his power retracting. She walked to him, her legs shaking. She looked at his face, at this monster from a nightmare. But he had bled for her son. He had taken the pain, the thing, into himself. What are you?" she whispered. "I am what your legends call a vampire," Alaric said, his voice quiet, weary. "And I am king of this city's night." "I have nothing," she whispered, the tears returning. "I have no money. I have nothing to... How can I ever repay you?" Alaric looked at her, at this small, fragile, fiercely strong human woman. He looked at her tear-streaked face. And for the first time in 500 years, he felt the frozen, dead thing in his chest ache. "You already have, Seraphina," he said, and his voice was softer than he intended. He reached out, his gloved fingers brushing a tear from her cheek. "You showed me something I believed had died centuries ago. Integrity. I have lived for 1,000 years surrounded by power and lies. I set a trap for a thief, and instead, I found the one honest person in my entire world." "So, what now?" she asked, her world tilted on its axis. "Now, your son will be taken to a private room upstairs, with the best care my world can offer. He will wake in the morning, healthier than he has ever been. And you," he said, his gaze holding hers, Your job as a housekeeper is over. I need a new personal assistant. Someone to manage the human-facing aspects of this hotel. Someone I know, without question, I can trust. The position pays significantly more. He was offering her a new life, a life where Finn would be safe, protected by the very power that had almost killed him. Serafina looked at her sleeping, healthy son, at this impossible, terrifying monster who just bled for him. "Yes," she said. "Anything." Alaric Volkov gave her a small, true smile. It was a faint, rusty thing, but it reached his eyes. "Go to your son. Welcome to the Onyx Sanctum, Serafina. The real part of it." Narrative conclusion, moral. The Onyx Sanctum was still a place of shadows and secrets, a haven for the creatures of the night. But it was no longer just Alaric's cold, unfeeling fortress. It now held a small, fierce, human light. In his long, eternal life, Lord Alaric Volkov, the Vampire King, had learned that power could buy loyalty, fear could buy obedience, and wealth could buy silence. But that night, he had learned a lesson he had forgotten. A lesson taught to him by a desperate woman with nothing to her name. This story teaches us that true strength is not found in eternal power or endless wealth. It is found in integrity when you have nothing left to lose. True value is not in what you can take, but in what you are willing to keep sacred, even when you are starving. Serafina, in her moment of greatest despair, could have taken the money. She had every justification. But she chose to keep her own integrity. And in doing so, she proved herself not a victim, but a force more powerful than any curse. Alaric, a king who had everything, was impoverished in a way he never realized. He was surrounded by beings of immense power, but he had no one he could truly trust. His greatest poverty was not the absence of money, but the absence of empathy and human connection. By saving Finn, he was not just performing an act of charity, he was making an investment. He was investing in goodness, in honesty, in the simple, unbreakable light of a human soul. The truest lesson is this: in a world of transactions, the most valuable currency is kindness. And true wealth, the only wealth that can fill a 1,000-year-old empty heart, is finding someone or something you are finally willing to bleed for.